have 5. Whoa. All right. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. 106. Roll call, please.
Oh, of course. William Wise is not present. Richmond Kelly.
Present.
Catherine Vanderwall. Rebecca Harper. Here. Jennifer Smith is not present. Nara Dalbaca. Not present. Robert Erie.
Here.
And then a fire district representative.
All Bruce Skelton at 5.
Great, thank you. So we have four. First item on our agenda is consideration of minutes from the March 4th task force meeting. If the board has had a moment to review those, let me know if you have any questions.
Can we do the minutes? We're going to the task force members are here today that we're
So we're tabling those minutes. How about March 18th? Did we have? Right, focus there. So, like that again for okay, tabling the 18 minutes. Move those to the next meeting. Because a number of the members that established quorum are not here today. All right, so we'll go right into discussion and presentation on the Board of Supervisors updates pertaining to the cannabis activities. So what we just distributed today was a copy of the staff report for the Board of Supervisors, item number 6.8 on their February 6th meeting. This is where, so members of the public, you can access the exact document we're looking at on the Board of Supervisors webpage for the February 6th, 2024 Board of Supervisors agenda. There is a table in there which encapsulated the recommendations for the task force. Hello. There were no changes except for, let's see, one on type 9 retail delivery only. The board wanted to make sure that C1 and C2 were not, that the delivery only would not be located on a main street. So delivery only means that there is no storefront, so the public is not accessing it. It is only a location of a retail storage of products and sales that are delivered. And so the board didn't want to have like a shut up, closed off storefront on a main street. Additionally, on the next page, the type 10 retail storefront, the board wanted to see that as a minor use permit in C1 and C2. So that is our community commercial and local commercial. Again, those are our main streets instead of a major use permit.
which one is that? I'm sorry.
That was type 10 retail storefront. Oh, sorry, and then flip back to page 3. One last thing, in the processor permit type, they recommended that we add PDC. Hey, Nara. Recommended that we add planned development commercial zoning district to what would be allowed. And that would also additionally have a
And that's on nursery, you said?
no, processor. Sorry, nursery had no changes. And that was with a minor use permit. That is all we have. So for those who, since that's I kind of zoomed in on what the changes were, we'll just go over again so that the people watching understand what the recommendations were from the task force that stand. That went past board supervisor review and were approved in concept without change. So that would be for new business license types, type 5 large cannabis cultivation. That is for cultivation over 1 acre. And it's a change from what we have currently because we did not have a type 5 in our zoning ordinance. We only had the type 3, which was the 1 acre outdoor or 22,000 square feet mixed light and indoor. So they're now adding a type 5. Shared manufacturing, there was no change. The recommendation was to allow this business type to be applied to both type 6 and type 7. So that's non-volatile and volatile manufacturing permits. So shared manufacturing is kind of like having a commercial kitchen where multiple restaurants or catering people will come and use them. This would be the similar model for that. Type 10 retail storefront with on-site consumption. Recommendation was to allow it with connection to a retail storefront with a minor use permit in a number of zones: land development commercial, community commercial, ag protection zone, ag, timber protection zone, rural lands, and rural residential. So again, that would be with a minor use permit for retail with on-site consumption. And then as an incidental use to an approved cultivation site. Oh, no, sorry, that was as an incidental use to approved cultivation site. So this would be allowing for retail storefront with on-site consumption to now be located where cannabis is cultivated. Similar to going out to the wineries, the estate wineries, where the grapes are processed on site and having a tasting room there. It's a similar model. And then, as an incidental use to a processing or manufacturing site in M1, M2, and MP, those are our manufacturing industrial uses, as well as C3, which is service commercial. Then back to with a major use permit, or onto with a major use permit, this would be incidental to an approved cultivation site in highway commercial, resort commercial, and suburban reserve. Temporary cannabis special events. Again, this is one of the new business types or business models that had not previously been considered by the board and were not included in our zoning ordinance. And as you know, we have a what's it called? Municipal zoning ordinance, which is kind of backwards because what it means is that if it's not in our zoning ordinance, then you can't do it. And so by considering the addition of these types of businesses into the zoning ordinance, the board has signaled that it is willing to consider regulation of these new types. So, okay, with that background, now we'll go back on temporary cannabis special events. Nara, jump in.
Question, sorry, we jump back. So the minor use permit and PDC and C2, those are existing commercial zones, right? Or
Yes.
existing dispensaries, and then that's why the
Yes.
semicolon there, it takes us into the
Yes,
cultivation. Okay, just making sure.
yeah, thank you. Okay, so temporary cannabis special events. The recommendation from the task force was to allow these events with an approved zoning permit in all zoning districts where the cannabis related businesses are allowed. And so there's a whole slew of them listed. One thing is an exception is rural residential. So it would not be allowed there. So let's go over zoning permits. Those are ministerial in that there are criteria, guidelines, and standards and regulations that will already be set up in the ordinance. And so if somebody wanted a special event, they can come with a zoning permit application. And so long as their project description matches the criteria that are required, we can go ahead and issue that. That being said, it's not necessarily over the counter because we also, like all of our zoning permits, where appropriate, we're reaching out to the different jurisdictions, different departments, and making sure that, like Sheriff's Office, we can make sure we've got fire on there too. Follow it, fire wants that. And
Absolutely.
getting that feedback, as far as sign offs.
Mhm.
For that zoning permit. So people wanting to have a special event will need to plan ahead. Because although it does not require a public hearing, it does require, enough time for the stakeholder agencies to do their review.
And the state also requires I believe a 60-day lead time with the list of all vendors that are going to be there.
Awesome.
That's
great.
Please add the fire districts to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Alright. Just making a note for that one so I don't forget it. Adding, make sure fire districts are on review. Cool. Also, is Holly in the Zoom today?
I believe so. Yes.
I was just thinking, Holly, that we don't usually send out zoning permits similar to our discretionary permits. We don't send those out for an RFR, so that wouldn't necessarily be sent to like HOAs or community municipal advisory councils. So, let's see. We're at the end of the new business case, so let's go ahead and take, Holly will call on you in just a minute. Let's go ahead and see if there's any questions from the task force. And we're not seeking any action on this item today either. This is just for our information for any of the task force members like Richmond, who wasn't even on the task force yet, or anyone who hadn't really caught up on what the board had done in February. Okay, we'll go
I
to
have something, sorry.
Oh,
Can you
yeah.
go back over type 10 with the board?
type 10
Yeah.
on page 305. No change
No, type 10 retail storefront.
with on-site consumption. What are you looking at?
On page 4.
Yeah. What did the board?
Minor use permit for C1 and C2. That's what I wrote down for the notes. It's a
Oh.
major use permit. That was essentially the
Okay.
words.
So minor for C1 and C2.
Let's see.
Four.
I see major use
I'm not on
permit
four
for
yet.
C1.
Great.
It was one you talked about earlier. I just wanted.
Oh, yeah, change to minor use permit C1 and C2. Okay. Yep. And I'll repeat that again too when we get to page 4.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Fine. All right. Let's see if they have any public input on this first section, the new business license type names. Go ahead, Holly.
Hi, I actually didn't have much on that, but since you mentioned that the cannabis events would not go out to the municipal councils for review, I was going to suggest you might want to reconsider that because there could be something worthwhile that they could actually tell you, possibly something to help out the event. It also could be the community could find out about it beforehand and actually promote it. I think it's a good idea to keep the municipal councils involved in all of this.
So it's not that we would keep them, it's that we would add them. So my only question is, like, I know that it won't be an over the counter, but it definitely won't take a month to do either. So do you know how that would? We might be able to send them out like as an informational only, but I don't know that we would wait.
That's totally fine, but I think Nara just said that the state requires 60 days.
Yeah, so maybe we can cover that when we get to our development standards.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
set
that would be
like
great. I think it's important to keep the communities involved because they can be helpful too.
Awesome. I'm writing that down. Thank you, Holly.
I'm gonna verify in the right now, but it's.
And yeah, so let's just put a pin in that one because today we're just going over the summary or the report, but the goal is as soon as we finish the standard or the very general development standards, we're going to start working on standards specific to these new business types and locations. And so that will be where we'll want to talk about that.
Sarah.
All right, development standard to the max. I mean, the zoning permit. Oops. Okay, next section, existing business types, but.
Maria,
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Sarah Bodner, consultant, and I just wanted to add a little context that for the task force members and the community that the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission did not give carte blanche for all of these activities to happen in all of these zones, like without further discussion. They were very clear that there's going to be a whole lot of other standards and conditions of approval that they want to hear before they allow these activities. Everything from events to the on-site consumption. And so they said yes to us continuing to do this work here in this group and develop those standards and additional criteria to allow these activities in these zones.
Good,
Thank you.
yes. Thanks, Sarah. And so overall, the goal or the plan of this task force remains the same. We sent their first batch of recommendations to the board and their approval was in concept only. So now going forward, we're working on the development standards. We're still working through general development standards, but then we're going to look at development standards for these specific recommendations. That is all going to get synthesized together into a draft ordinance that will then go to this task force, then also the Agriculture Advisory Board, then the Planning Commission in a notice public hearing, and eventually to the board. Our goal is to have it to the board in a notice public hearing by the end of this year. So thanks, Sarah, that was good. All right.
And give 60 days.
60 days at the state?
60 days at the state, no later than 60 days prior to the first day of the event.
Okay. And adding a similar amount of time at our local level would then give the municipal advisory councils a chance to have their meeting because they just meet once a month. So that might work out well.
And you're required to have local jurisdiction if they want to, so they will be checking the states on the things the state will check.
Good. Okay. Type 4, nursery, no changes. So the recommendation on this one was to add the industrial zones, M1, M2, and MP with a minor use permit, and then service commercial with a major use permit for nurseries. Processor. The change here was to add planned development commercial to the recommendation of addition of the service commercial, then the industrial, 3 industrial zones with an approved minor use permit. So what was approved was addition of C3, M1, M2, MP, and PDC with an approved minor use permit to the already existing requirement of a major use permit in ag preserve, ag, timber preserve, and rural lands. Type 6, non-volatile manufacturing. The only change here for the type 6 was the addition of the industrial park MP zoning district with a major use permit. A side note on that is we don't have any land that's currently zoned for industrial park, but when the previous cannabis policy discussions were taking place, the concept was to create sort of an industrial park that would serve as different cannabis permit types all along the chain. So it could be indoor cultivation with the manufacturing, probably not going to get a lab, but capturing that activity all in one location. But so far it hasn't happened yet. Type 7, right? Volatile manufacturing, no change. So, oh wait, there was a change. It's currently allowed in M2. But the recommendation was to add M1 and MP. So in all of our industrial zoning districts, the board is willing to consider type 7 volatile manufacturing. Okay, type 10 retail storefronts. Currently, cannabis retail businesses are a use by right. That means that they don't require planning permits in C2, which is our local commercial, which is where a lot of our main streets are. In C1, it requires a major use permit. So the recommendation of the task force was to allow retail storefronts in the following districts with a minor use permit. We did have C2 in there, but that was amended later. So resort commercial, highway commercial, planned development commercial, ag preserve, ag, timber preserve, rural lands, and rural residential, if they're incidental to an approved cannabis cultivation site. again, let's see. Yeah, okay. And then, incidental to approved cannabis processing or manufacturing sites in C3, so that's your service commercial and all industrial zoning districts. And then with a major use permit, they added C1 in there. Wait. Nope, they didn't. Suburban reserve incidental to approved cannabis cultivation sites.
Funny thing,
That doesn't make sense.
we had C1 on here.
We had C1 down here and there was, they made that a minor.
Oh.
So,
okay.
yeah, they changed a minor use
Major.
permit to C1 and C2. So that's why up here in minor use permit where it says C2, that's gonna be going down. So that actually is fine. It's a minor use permit in C1 and C2.
Okay.
Distributor, type 11, currently allowed with a major use permit in C3, M1, M2, and PDC. The recommendation from the task force was to allow the minor use permit as an incidental use to approved cultivation sites. So it was a reduction in the permit requirements from a major to a minor. In only though, as an incidental use to approved cultivation sites, ag preserve, ag timber preserve, rural lands, rural residential and suburban preserve. Last one in that section is micro business. There were no changes to the recommendation of the task force, which was to allow micro businesses with a minor use permit in the community commercial, service commercial, and all industrial zoning districts. Did the task force have any questions on this section? Nara?
I know that the retail storefront, that was one of the things we were asked, to consider early on in the task force, but before we got into the other side of things. Are those changes to, make that discretionary? Is that already in place or is that also waiting on the programmatic EIR to change?
It would be waiting until the ordinance is adopted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's. so
Yeah, none of
still-
these
still
changes
pending.
take place. These are all
Right.
just in concept. Nothing really happens until that ordinance is adopted and 28 days later it goes into effect.
Okay, I wasn't sure because I know we sent that, I thought, to the board separately earlier on to make, retail dispensaries, discretionary. Ministerial.
Yeah, but it instead of doing that whole ordinance process for just that one change, we folded it into these recommendations. Any hands in the Zoom?
No.
Okay.
Oh, Holly just,
Oh, go ahead, Holly.
Oh, hi. Are you going to post that on the cannabis page? The updates that you just
Table?
talked about, updated table? Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
That was-
thanks.
Okay. Then the last section was changes in permit levels. So this would be going from like a minor to a major, major to a minor, or something to a zoning permit. First one, distributor transport only. The recommendation, currently it does require a major use permit in C2, C3, M1, M2, and PDC. And let's talk about distributor transport only. This is basically somebody running a van service or some kind of courier service for cannabis products for other licensees. The recommendation from the task force was to remove the use permit requirement. Only allow it as an incidental use to approved cultivation, processing, or manufacturing sites in pretty much all the zoning districts where cannabis is allowed. Since the public can't see this one, APZ, Ag, TPZ, RL, RR, SR, C2, C3, M1, M2, MP, and PDC. The board had no change on that. And then the last one in this section is a type 13 distributor transport only self-distribution license. This is the permit or license type that allows a cannabis cultivator or manufacturer to transport their own product from licensee to licensee. Currently allowed with a minor use permit in all of the before stated zoning districts. The task force recommendation was to add the industrial park to one of the possible zoning districts and remove the use permit required. Let it be an allowed use, only as an incidental, already approved or, existing use for cultivation, processing, or manufacturing. So this would not, so this means that if you have, a cultivation or processing or manufacturing permit operating in Lake County, you would not have to go get an additional use permit to be able to transport your product from licensee to licensee. And one thing that was requested, both here and at the planning commission, was the addition of a comparable table between the, of what we have for our current winery requirements and tasting rooms. So that was also added in. There's nothing for the task force to really do about that one. I just wanted you guys to know that we did add that in. So we will make note, we're gonna update the table that the task force just covered. And we'll definitely get that up on the site and we'll use that table going forward. Are there any task force questions about the table, any part of it that we just went over? Any hands raised?
We know.
Okay, seeing none, bring it back. No hand raised, okay. I'll make sure. Good, so that was just a discussion. Go moving on to the next item, consideration for general requirements for cannabis activities. Hey Ruby, is the stuff that's highlighted stuff we've already done or stuff we need to do?
So that it's, I didn't take any of the highlighting off when it was through.
Oh, okay,
And then we did have to go through A through B. And B already had a motion on it in February, but that's what we were going back through. So A, C, D, and E.
right, we had not taken action on ACP and E,
Yeah.
so that's what we're gonna start with, okay. Thank you.
Just to confirm for the permit requirements, fire districts are on there, right?
Let's see where that was.
Just for review, permit review and everything, fire districts are on it.
I wanted to say
Oh, yeah.
absolutely, because that's what we're doing, but let's make sure we find it. I don't know offhand where it
Thank
is. Yeah, but,
I mean, I know it's
Yes.
not listed right on here, but I don't know if on each of your applications if there is,
right,
you know.
see if it's the right spot. So A. County permit requirements. In section A, it was the draft statement for considerations. I think that we had sort of wordsmithed previously, but hadn't taken a vote on. Is that correct, Ruby?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll give you a moment to take a look at that. And for our viewing public, we are off of the staff report that we were using for the recommendation, now back into the agenda material, so you should all have something to follow along with. There's.
Oh, no, I was
Okay.
thinking the same thing.
Good. So we're on 72(3)A. I like that Andrew set this up. Also, we had the announcement that I guess that, Andrew is no longer with the department. So Michelle is stepping up to assist me and, to provide staff support to the task force going forward. Over the past year, as far as our cannabis permit management has gone, we've gradually taken more and more of it in-house. And so our current existing planning staff is the one that's processing the cannabis permits. They've received in the last year and a half, many trainings on CEQA, a lot of different trainings as we're going along. And so they're in a really good spot now to be able to have the capacity to process these permits. Though we are going to look for, we are posting for a senior planner as well as, Just-
Oh, posted.
Yeah, oh, it
middle of
did, good,
the
so,
flex narrative for assistant associate.
Yeah.
To all the options.
yes. So if you know anyone who wants to have a totally fun, awesome job, feel free to send them our way.
What's the requirement?
For planner,
Mhm.
well, there's different requirements at all different levels, and so I would recommend it going to the Lake County website, which is lakecountyca.gov, and click on job opportunities. It'll take you right there. Basically, but I'll tell you what I'm looking for, is someone who is a team player, someone who is solution oriented, can think about things from multiple viewpoints, and is also able to learn SQL, which is like that's maybe the least favorite part of the job, but it is fascinating to have a position in the department where you get to help somebody achieve, their goals and their dreams, but making sure that it's done in a way that's consistent to the general plan and the area plans, is respectful of tribal resources, and it takes into account all of the many really important criteria that we have to keep Lake County the way we like it. So it's a really cool job. All right, anyway, sorry, I digress. Draft statement for consideration. Was there any questions, commentary from the task force before we check for hands raised? I feel like I've done enough just reading to you guys, so I'm not going to read that one. If there is no commentary, are there any hands raised in the Zoom or in the conference room for public input? Nope. All right, we'll bring it back to the task force for action on the draft statement for consideration.
I will make a motion to accept or approve the draft statement for consideration for 73.3A.
Great.
Presented.
Do we have a second? Excellent. All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that one passes. Next one, B. We did B, right? It says here that we did B.
Yes.
Excellent. Moving on to C, business entity requirements. I think our intention is to mirror the state. Because that's where we got this original language from the state application requirements.
Most recent set of regulations.
I think that's why some of it has been crossed off, yeah. But without Andrew around to confirm that one, we can go ahead. Are there any further task force questions? Not, we'll go with public input. Any hands raised for business entity requirements? Go ahead, Mark.
It's not quite on business entity requirements, but one of the issues I see here is, once again, there's no dating or rev levels on each of the pages. And so the motion that you just made, provide an informative statement, but you didn't, nothing was read. And so there's nothing really to refer to because there's no rev level or date on that. Whereas the one that you're doing right now says maintain the current language. That's pretty easy. But possibly, and I don't know how you do it, but possibly some way, it could be worded so that, one can easily reference exactly which version of anything is voted on.
Okay, so we just approved the draft statement for consideration as listed in today's agenda. Would that suffice?
That would be good.
Okay,
But it also too, if you could just have them somehow get the date and the rev level on the bottom of each page, it would be helpful. Because, sometimes these pages come apart, and I know, Mariah, you said, I think you had 30 versions of something at one point.
so how about this? In the recordation of the minutes, let's add in the statement itself.
Okay,
Yeah,
That-
that way we'll have everything in the minutes in detail.
That's
And
perfect.
we don't have to flip back and forth to any version or worry that maybe they didn't get the right version.
okay, thank you.
Cool, thanks. Ruby, I saw you nod. Excellent. All right, so back to business entity requirements. Is there any public input to that specific item? If not, we'll bring it back for motion. But if you don't mind, I'd like to add something into that motion that it could be approved pending confirmation that it is consistent with the state language, which we wouldn't need to bring back to the task force. We can just do that. So, okay, so we're ready for a motion. It would be maintain. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll move, B to approve the language to add the.
Actually, C.
C.
Yeah.
Ignore C. This one.
Yeah, this one, C, business entity requirements, we're in section C.
Yes, I'm looking, sorry, I was looking at the motion for consideration.
Oh, you're right. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So the, doesn't have C though, so. it's-
Yeah, right.
I'm looking at right there. So I move, motion B under section C, business entity requirements, to add language that, this should mirror the state requirements.
Okay, so remove or add any sections of the current language that are inconsistent with the state. Right?
Right.
Not exactly. Remove inconsistent language and add,
Right.
and add any as required.
Yes, exactly as the state make changes in the future, so you wanna.
Yeah, it could be simplified by saying you move to maintain the current language for business entity requirements. Amend language to reflect statement. Or amend language to mirror statement. That's,
Okay, maintain and amend language to mirror state language. Got it.
No, that's part of my motion.
Awesome. We're getting it. We're getting it.
Yeah.
All right, any second?
oh, I can.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, next one. D, property owner's approval. So
Typo in the second line.
is there, okay, oh yeah, containing.
Continue.
And then
You should casual.
yeah. This is discussion. Okay, so this is a little different that I want to make sure we understand the ramifications of that.
Mhm.
Currently, we have not required the property owner to be co-applicant or co-permittee for an approved project. We just require notarized authorization of the property owner for this permit to be submitted for business activity on their property. I think that this is the wording then that came from the visit that Patrick had regarding the difficulties that they were having collecting the taxes from people because a permittee is not the same as a property owner, and so they're harder to track down. So that's where the draft statement for consideration was adding as a requirement that in addition to the notarized signature, it would also require the property owner be listed as co-applicant and co-permittee. And that written approval be renewed annually. So I missed this meeting when it was discussed at the task force. I'm just wondering, where did the task force land on this for discussion for today?
It could be I think when we discussed it, there was some conversation about whether this would be difficult on the state level. Are they an applicant, if they're considering an applicant at the county level, are they considered an applicant at the state level? Are they considered an owner of interest holder, which are both separate considerations for the state. I don't know if we've got licensees, I see Sarah saying that's good. Licensees or other folks who may want to weigh on this, but that would be, this would be one where I would want to hear from Jen or somebody who's listening, whether this could make things difficult, because sometimes you have an FCT property owner or somebody that doesn't want to share the level of information that's required to be submitted at the state level, or somebody who may not pass a background check, but is just collecting rent. So I think there are some considerations on this one that we should probably discuss.
Okay, is there anything else from the task force?
I know coming from a CEQA compliance standpoint and drug culture resource standpoint, we've kind of had to revamp some of our agreements due to this, because we had signed agreements with just the leasee, I guess, right? And when it came down to after everything was done, we did find cultural resources out there, and there was an agreement for us to be able to put those back in the general area where it came from. The owner wasn't a part of that signature.
Interesting.
So we couldn't go put those things back. So we had to revamp our agreements for landowners to be a part or a signature to what the lease was also agreed to as well.
Okay.
So it will impact his certain responsibilities.
We've also had controversies come up within the department where the permittee wanted to cease business, but the property owner wanted to take it up, and the permittee and the property owner were not in sync either, and so it did make things more complicated navigating that one.
It can, because at the state level, it's you can have an operator that's not the license holder, and so that can make things difficult. There are breakdowns in the business relationship,
Right.
That maybe the person who's cultivating is the license holder and not the property owner, or vice versa.
Question. Well, I'm kind of looking ahead, but with E for background checks and licenses, somebody that's applying for a permit could potentially be denied if they weren't, they didn't pass that background check.
Right.
So how would that work if the property owner?
Exactly.
That's one of the complications of adding this into our required language.
Well, no, but even then with not even, is it still at that point considered legal? Even if you take this verbiage out, would it still be considered legal if the property owner is not allowed to have that kind of activity going on his property, right? If he wouldn't pass the background check, regardless of being a co-applicant or anything like that, there's a level of involvement that would occur even
At the property owner level, if they are not part of the permit or the license in some form of ownership that are described in state law, they do not have that requirement of background check.
At the state level, generally, what they're required to submit is a form that says permission to operate from the property owner. That's what's required at the state level. So this is going And I understand where Patrick's coming from too, so, and where, travel resources are coming, that's really important, and also I could see where a property owner might make things more difficult for you all based on an agreement that you've made with their lessee. But yeah, it is adding a layer at the state level, that isn't required.
I kind of see both sides of the coin where on one part of it, you have a property owner, and yeah, go do it, like I'm just trying to rent out my property and get some cash flow. And that they shouldn't be a part of it, but then there's another part of you that goes, is this a loophole in the system now? If we don't have that in for people that may want to do it, but know that they won't pass a background check to somehow circumvent, you know.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear from Patrick if he thinks there are any other possible solutions to that issue.
And I agree with Jen and more people that, you know.
Yeah.
More thoughts on it.
Yeah, you just may have somebody that's not, or a property owner that's just collecting rent and is absentee and you need a signature, or you need them to show up, or you need to fill out their live scan form, or go to the sheriff's office for that, and they may not be around, and that could end up holding up licensure too, so, I'd like to hear from, Sarah, she's right.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's no further task force. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi there, this is Sarah Bodner, consultant, and I have represented clients that have done both. I have had clients who applied for permits and their landlord was not an applicant or a co-applicant. And I have had other clients who have applied and they and their landlord elected to be co-applicants for different reasons. And both arrangements, I think, are very important to allow. I think that forcing landowners to become co-applicants is a profound and fundamental change in the licensing structure, and it's not asked anywhere else in the state. I think it could raise certain questions about property rights. I think it's unconventional to force a property owner to go into business with their tenant, for a lot of reasons that may not be advantageous. Everything from where they want their income on the books to come from, and if they simply just have no interest in it and they want a traditional landlord-tenant relationship. So what I would suggest at this stage is figure out what you're really trying to solve for and look at all of the options to solve for it. If there are problems with tax collections, let's look at other ways we can improve tax collections. If there's problems meeting other agency requirements, are there other ways we can do that don't require forcing landlords to go into business? I do think it's an important option to have, and that it can be the right arrangement for certain applicants. But for others, it could potentially dissuade people from doing business in Lake County, for a lot of reasons. And I won't go into those all now, but I think that it would be good to explore this a lot further before coming to any decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
I was just wondering, because Sarah mentioned, looking from other angles to see if we could solve this issue. It already states that, the applicant must have written permission from the property owner. Is there some way we could include some type of document, like tax liability documents, that they would also have to sign on to, saying, that they're potentially on the hook for any tax collections?
Tax and cultural resources.
Well, the cultural resources, I understand the importance of that as well, but I think that's one of those things, it's definitely happened to me, where you get something signed with the folks who aren't necessarily in a position to sign it. You live and learn from that, and maybe we have to work directly with property owners. I think at least there's a workaround for that, right?
We restructured our agreement.
Yeah.
So, so we basically, if we had people out there that were, collecting resources while they were working, that were out there. The agreement now basically says, okay, well, we also have to have the approval of the landowner.
Yeah.
So they know that, we're going to go and return these things once the completion of the project, right? So we've kind of, like you're saying, lesson learned, right? And kind of restructured our agreements to put that in, so they know, and they won't get approval from us until we have both.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense.
I like what you were saying, and then it would be up to whoever the property owner is to, like you said, restructure their agreement for them to make it fit, but they know I'm responsible for this, you know.
I'm wondering if we could also amend our notarized statements of authorization to include sort of a heads up. This could have implications regarding cultural resource replacement, should it be necessary, tax payments. I'm not sure that that would have any legal weight though. So I would request then that we table this so that I can talk to county council to see if it's even possible to do that.
Just really quick, I have a hard stop at 2. So
Alrighty, see if there's anything interesting left. You know, we really want to make sure we get covered. Background checks and clearances. I think this is going to take us past 2. We haven't actually, okay, so we're tabling D. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, table D. Next meeting. Is there anything you really don't want to miss, Robert, that we should table until you can come back?
that was really the big thing that kind of stuck out.
Okay,
But yeah, it's construction season, so I think for me.
no kidding. I think background checks are gonna have prompt some discussion. Duty record, track and trace, all that will be fine. Let's see, we needed to do D and E, right?
Yeah.
Ruby, so we're finishing up E for the catch up part. Okay. All right, so background checks. I can tell by this highlighting. The state of California does not require passing a background check for employees, just for owners of the license. However, Lake County required it in the beginning, so that has brought up a number of issues. And it's been interesting to see how we've seen businesses sort of try to get that done. I know when I worked in Ukiah, it was a real problem with the retailers because it takes so long to get your background check done that you need somebody right then, and they're just waiting for a long time. So the board will be very interested to see what the recommendation is from the task force on this particular one. If you want to require employee background checks to continue, or if you are, or if you have other recommendations.
What's the standard turnaround time on a background check? Do you know off the top of your head?
It could be. Are they ever quick? I think it's like.
I was gonna
at
say a
least a
couple
few
months,
weeks.
but maybe
Yeah.
Sarah,
Sometimes.
Well, also our background checks go to DOJ and Homeland Security too. So they're not just your normal ones. Like when you're applying for a job in the county, that can go quick.
Yeah.
But these are not the same. These are a higher review level. And then it has to go to the sheriff's deputies, who then have to have time to do their review. Yeah. Are there any questions about background checks before we open it up to the public?
What was the intent of having the employee's background check?
I think that the board was acting out of an abundance of caution.
The only other thing, I don't know whether we decide to move forward in either direction, but the language regarding the failure of a background check. So an individual may fail the background check if employee has been convicted of an offense that is substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of the business or profession for which the application is made. I think that statement is just kind of, I think it's vague. It's weird to me. I don't know. Who determines if their conviction is substantially related to that? I mean, I just don't,
That would be the sheriff's
raising
office.
a flag to what that statement really means. And if there's a background check, are we?
Plus, we usually have may be, you know, we don't.
Right.
It's either this.
You are or
that.
you aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes, I
you
agree.
may fail it or you will fail. I think that needs to be
And
looked
what are
at.
the repercussions?
That needs to be looked at regardless of which direction we go on this.
Okay.
Testing, things to the shall include among the two.
Yeah, it's just pretty flimsy language.
Mhm.
And when, we had Keithley in here, he had kind of alluded to that. This doesn't necessarily include all the convictions that he thinks should prohibit somebody from working on the operation, so. Again, another reason why it kind of popped up to me to look at that.
Mhm. So let's start with the first sentence then. All applicants and employees shall undergo background check. Where do we stand on employees?
So I think the previous discussion we had was regarding temporary seasonal employees and the trouble that raises. Maybe it's feasible to have a background check for somebody that's a permanent position or a manager or even just a full-time employee, but to have them done on every seasonal employee, especially if you're using an FLC, might prove more difficult. And maybe you don't even get the background check back by the time
Yeah, totally.
the period that you needed them is over, and you don't know who you're getting, so how do you know who to sign up for,
Right.
Yeah.
It's not how our ag workers usually work with even conventional ag around.
Yeah.
And the LCCA conversation, the retailers that did raise that, it can be important for them to have employee background check because of the cash on site. And that doesn't tend to be as much of an issue in the supply chain side of businesses, but the cash and the easy availability of finished final form cannabis. So it's,
But that could be at the discretion of that employer.
yeah.
They could just require that they do background, but if we change this, it doesn't prohibit them from doing background check.
But that was the only licensee of and the LCCA conversation happened that had any interest in or felt that there was a need for it. But yeah, I think that exactly that can be done.
What were you thinking, Paul?
I was just thinking, because I mean, I know you could go get a background check up at the sheriff's office right now, just a quick one, and their turnaround on it is completely different compared to DOJ and everything, and maybe that would be what it is, as they go up, and once you get that one, if you wanted to keep the same language in there where they get the DOJ and everything, then it can be a provisional condition to work until the DOJ one comes back, or even just a low level.
How's that enforced?
Or you just have them, or it's just the low level one at the sheriff's department,
Well, I think this was
That's about a
originally
quicker
meant
turnaround
to,
time on it.
again,
Oh,
mirror
for
the
seasonal
state.
employees, you're
Not,
saying?
not even for seasonal, for the people at the storefront that are worried about the cash and everything, they can get
Oh, they could get a quicker one.
yeah.
That's cool. But do we want to require it then for employees, or would we want to leave it up to the discretion of the actual employer?
I think at minimum, full-time employees should,
Mhm.
full-time or regular part-time employees should have background check.
Yeah.
So this is a community issue, by the way. I can tell you right now. If you live in a place where they have all of these cultivation, like where I live, your neighbors and the community around it, they want that in there. They want to know that these people coming and going, which we see them by the hundreds sometimes. If you want the community support with cannabis, or at least to ease their fears a little bit, I can tell you right now, they want to believe, at least they want to think
Right.
that every employee that shows up and
Though let's also keep in mind that these are no longer employees now, though, because a lot of people are contracting. So then there's subcontractors, and so they're not required to do it anyway, is what we see a lot.
yeah, and I get the issue.
For seasonal
Yeah.
labor, the contract is with and you may not know day to day whether they're gonna send the same people out.
I agree with Rebecca on full-time permit employees. I think that's a good start.
And even
Seasonal would be
regular
very hard to keep track of.
Yeah. Nearly impossible. And even if you have that as a requirement, it's pretty hard to enforce, I would say.
Okay, so before we make any decisions, let's open it up to public. Sarah's got her hand up.
And then we had, guest, I think is Angela, she had her hand up first.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Angela.
Hi, thank you. So I'll start with the background checks, but I had my hand raised for the property owner, the last item, so I'll go back to that after. But for the background checks, so Sheriff Keithley did say that it is a big issue because he does see people that have history that should not be working on some of these sites. Turnaround time averages around 2 to 6 weeks, depending on the time of the year. And there's no reason that seasonal workers, they don't have to wait until harvest season to go and try to get their background check. They can go in May, June, months before season starts and get their background check. DOJ's turnaround time is about 10 days. So it's not a really long time. And as far as the property owners, so if a property owner had convictions on their record that would prevent them from having a cannabis permit, they can have a property owner approved with conditions, so that, can't be on site or can't be physically working at the property. There are ways around it. I think the background checks, like Richmond Kelly said, is a big concern for people for residents, to maintain safety. And someone mentioned subcontractors. Are subcontractors in cannabis, do they not have to follow AB5 when it comes to cannabis?
We don't know what 85 is.
So AB5 says that they have to the subcontractor has to follow the same rules as an employer. They can't just they have to. So let's say like a subcontractor, a truck driver, where they would work under a company and they would be covered by the company's insurance and stuff. Now they have to have their own. They're separate entities, but they have to maintain the same level of compliance.
That assembly bill was written to regulate DoorDash, Lyft, and other
Uber, yeah.
companies like Uber who were not providing the required benefits and other things to their employees by scapegoating them and saying they're a contractor. So not exactly the same as like a licensed farm labor contractor, not exactly the same situation. Because the employees that work for a farm labor contractor are employees of farm labor contract. And then you contract with farm labor contract. So just for her,
Right.
some background on that.
But at this point then, if the employee is a subcontractor to the labor contractor, then they are not employees of the permit.
Yeah, that doesn't apply to this or any other like farm labor contracted
Okay.
business.
Okay, so then I would just like to request that if we are gonna have a deep discussion about this, that we do it with Sergeant Keithley there, since he's the one that goes through it, because a person can have convictions and the sheriff's department can, depending on the level of the conviction, can give them the permit to work on one of these at a cannabis location. It's at their discretion. So I would recommend that we include Sergeant Keithley in these conversations if we can. Thank you. And then let me know when I can go back to the property owner section.
Thanks, Angela. Go ahead and do property owner.
Okay, so with that,
Angela, just say it.
Because I gotta get ready to go, but
Yeah.
there was one thing that I wanted to comment on as far as 73.6 administrative process procedures application requirements. Under it, I wanted to just put under property management plan. They have biological and cultural, tribal cultural resources. They're all different categories. So if we can get that spelled out and to make sure that there is some type of procedure for that or for assessing that. Even though down on the bottom in secret review, we'll get there, but a lot of times where they try to establish or create mitigation plans for cultural resources, they're usually not sufficient for tribal cultural resources. So we can kind of address that. Or
I can promise you, we're not getting to that today.
yeah, I just wanted to say it, right,
Yeah.
but thank you.
Awesome, thanks a lot. Okay, Angela, property owner.
all right, sorry. So just after hearing Patrick's concerns and him having no recourse for collection when there isn't a property owner listed, that's a big concern. That should concern everybody in the county. This ordinance really should protect the county as a whole and creating a sustainable industry. And I want to remind everybody that the county can be more restrictive than the state. So just like the background checks, when we come to this property owner approval, I really think that we need to include Patrick in this to make sure that he is able to collect these taxes legally, because he has no recourse right now, and that's a big issue for the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I mean, sorry, Angela. Was Holly next or Sarah?
We have Sarah.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I spoke to Sheriff Howe after the first meeting where background checks were discussed, and he wanted to bring it to his department and have a discussion with his team about background checks. And at the last meeting, Jennifer Smith requested that he be notified that it was going to be agendized and invited. And I agree with Angela that the sheriff should be present. Sheriff Howe was going to get input from his deputies, and I don't know if he was actually invited to be here today and given a proper heads up. But I think that that's really important because this is under the purview of their department. Relating to the different requirements, firstly, I'll just restate that cannabis in no way is exempt from any employment laws in the state of California. We're held to everything and some. And Rebecca is exactly right that the relationship between a farm and then hiring a farm labor contractor is not bypassing that. The farm labor contractor has employees, which are laborers. And the nature of agriculture is that, you hire those crews as needed, kind of on the turn of a dime. And so, when you suddenly need to harvest or when you suddenly need to pull tarps or when the weather changes and whatnot. And so it has presented some bottlenecks in the field for operators to be held to these background check requirements when farming is highly it can be unpredictable. So we did query the Lake County Cannabis membership the beginning of this year to ask what's working and what's not working. And we did get the feedback from retailers that although it can be a little cumbersome, they do think that it's important that their employees go through background checks because of their exposure to product and cash. And where it really presents a lot of obstacles for farmers is in the field when you've got employees of your farm labor subcontractors that are also required to go through checks potentially, or when you've got seasonal work that's coming in to help you and people are mostly touching plants and dirt. And is it really necessary that every single person who comes on your property be held to that? So that was the perspective that we wanted to open up, and maybe we could consider background checks only for owners and management, and not for every single person that picks up a shovel. Thank you.
Sarah? Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, hi. Maybe, I don't know if this would work or not, but maybe looking at it from a different point of view in that anybody who's applying for a job working with cannabis has to provide a background check or get a certificate so that the onus isn't put all on the applicant, but no one is allowed to hire someone who doesn't have that check done.
Thank you, Holly.
One issue that I run into with a client is when it was actually somebody who was a manager owner, but they were a Canadian citizen, and so for those who are not American citizens, that's when the DOJ side of things and the Homeland Security side of things gets really complicated and can be held up for months. And that may be something that we're looking at with farm workers. That might be something else to think about, that having to do the full DOJ, FBI background check could make it so that people are not, it would take the whole season potentially to actually get somebody approved. Who's not a citizen.
Okay, I'm getting the sense that maybe we want to table this one as well, especially if Sheriff Howe was thinking that he was gonna get invited. What's the deal of the task force?
I think law enforcement, is important one.
Okay, so we'll move this to the next agenda and we will extend an invitation to both Sheriff Howe and Sergeant Keithley to join us. And if they're not able, then we're gonna move it to a following agenda.
And Keithley was invited for this one. I
Oh, he
just
was?
needed a response.
And we will read.
Maybe, I don't know, if he was invited when you sent the agenda out on Friday, is that when? So maybe we could invite him in advance of that.
Yeah,
He doesn't
let's work out.
necessarily need the agenda packet,
Mhm.
he could, if we could just invite him in advance.
We'll,
of
we'll,
Or what?
let's do that. We'll work with Sergeant Keithley to find out when he is available, according to this nice shiny new calendar that we have. And then we'll put that agenda item on that date.
Can we make a request for him to bring in maybe a list of what some of these,
Yeah,
because that's awfully great, because there could be stuff that he deems, or any individual from the sheriff's office deems that it is a substantial offense, and then the next person that comes in that does these background checks could deem that it's not. So there's not a level of consistency, so I'm just trying to gather. So, like Rebecca said, a little bit gray, I'm gonna trying to wrap my head around.
We will make that request. All right, so where are we now? At activity records.
so because these ones aren't agendized, we can't take any action on it. Yeah.
Did we not agendize these?
No.
No, it's just the.
So much faster on the tabling stuff.
Well, I mean, it's.
No, you're right.
So we're not that,
Yeah,
not that.
no, we've done good work today. Okay, so then let's move on to discussion of the Cannabis Task Force meeting schedule. We realized that there was a little bit of confusion in scheduling the meetings, because I thought they were every other week. But then we ended up skipping a week, and then we've had some special meetings. So anyway, we proposed this as the list of meetings for the rest of 2024. They are approximately every other week.
I had a question when it gets to the end of the year. I noticed it's November 18th and then jumps to December 9th instead of December 2nd. Was there a reason for that?
Is that not every other week?
No.
These were every other week.
Because if it was every other week, it'd be November 18th, then December 2nd, then December 16th.
No. Excuse me. Let's take a look. No, I thought we do have a week where, but that's not until December, when the whole courthouse is closed, and we do have Thanksgiving breaks, but I don't think we have anything in the
Thanksgiving is
beginning.
the 25th.
Okay,
Or
cool.
sorry, the week of the 20th, that would be 11/25.
All right, let's take a look at December.
Yeah, and the reason we did the 12/9 is just because we weren't gonna do 2 in December because we have that break at the end, so we just made it kind of in the middle.
When's
So
the
it
break
can
at the end of
absolutely-
December?
It's
23rd through the 27th.
But so if we went by the regular schedule, that wouldn't interfere with our meeting.
So the
Because it
last
would be
one
the
was
second,
11/18, and then the next one would be December 2nd.
Yeah.
And then December 16th, so we can have 2 meetings in December and still not be impacted by that holiday.
Yeah, no, we just had done 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
that's what we did with planning commission.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, for this one, that's.
and we may not need these meetings as we get to December, because hopefully we'll have realized my dream of getting this ordinance to the board. Yeah,
But just moving forward, should we put it for the?
yeah,
Okay.
just tentatively, it'll be
Yes.
the 2nd and the 16th.
Okay.
All right, is that consistent with all the other ones?
Yeah, I checked all the.
Oh, you did? Excellent. Good job. Okay. So
I won't be here next week, just to throw that in
well,
there.
if you can send Ruby an email, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Just let
I will not either,
Okay.
and I believe, Chief Spade will be.
Chief Spade will be here for you. Okay, and Nora, you're out?
I'm looking at the summer dates now, so.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so if you have any conflict with any of these dates, please send Ruby an email.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. What else? Do we have public comments on anything that is within the purview of the task force, but not already on today's agenda?
if they want to comment on the calendar.
Oh, well, we're not taking action on the calendar, it's just a presentation.
And then Angela.
Angela, go ahead.
Thank you. So during the March 4th meeting, I think it was Andrew's last meeting, he had mentioned a document that he was working on and he was going to be bringing it to the task force at the next meeting or the following meeting after that. Do you know what that document was or if anybody is working on it? And he also mentioned at that same meeting that he was working on compiling information for so when we got to the 10-year mark, we would have everything so that we could look at a 10-year review. And is someone continuing that work right now since Andrew's no longer there? I just want to check. Thank you.
Okay, we'll look into that. I don't know what document. What do you know, Michelle?
It's probably the audit would be my guess, potentially what we were calling the audit internally, which is basically a massive spreadsheet of all of the projects that have been approved, denied, are in process. And then as well as their monitoring dates moving down the line. So that tracks with the 10-year comment that you made, because then at the end of the 10 years, we're able to, extrapolate some of that data. It's really an internal document though, but we can certainly talk about that more. That's something that folks are interested in seeing.
Well, I think already part of our ordinance, I don't think the 10 years are gonna sneak up on us because there's a requirement for reapplication. Otherwise, the permit itself would expire.
So I think what she was speaking of, on the March 4th minutes, if you look under section C, or excuse me, section 6, and then right under A, it says, Director Turner spoke, stating the next meeting staff will present an updated current state regulations showing the table. So that was like from today. And then if you go down to section E.
Yeah, and I brought that, but it wasn't even worth a table.
Yeah.
We had staff research it and it was like 2 things that we wrote down on a piece of paper. So
Yeah.
there wasn't the table. There wasn't enough data to generate a table.
And then section E, I think this is what Andrew was supposed to be working on. Stating clarification is needed on language. Staff should develop a checklist for permittees, such as an operational manual, operating standards for conditions of approval.
Oh, cool. Okay,
That's what-
so that's not something we're gonna bring back here. That's a application document that we would generate based on the updated standards or regulations. And so it would be more of an informational packet for prospective applicants. Good. Okay, Angela, if it's anything other than those, send me an email.
And there was some conversation about an outline, but I think that's.
I think that's what this is. Yeah. Yeah, and well, I like this format that you set up. I think we can keep going. Eventually we're gonna hit the end of the general development standards, and then we're gonna switch over and then we'll have to figure out a good format for going forward with the new in concept types and zoning districts and those development standards. Good. Is there any further public comments? If not, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 2:24. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Our next meeting is when? Where are we? What day is it? 4/22, April 22nd. Awesome. And in between then, we will get, Holly, that the updated table posted so that it's available. Thanks, everybody.